sweet, especially for most people. So do you think maybe what we should be doing is making movies about what life was really like then, and showing, you know, gangrenous legs and people with smallpox, and what life was like during the 100 Years' War, to sort of remind people that, yes, of course, it is irritating sometimes that you get stuck in traffic, but it's nothing like having smallpox.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I mean, actually, that's a very rich question, because there are lots of different things that one could extract from it. One of them is that we take for granted what science has done for us in positive respects, and we take also for granted that we can grumble at the things that science via technology has done that threatens us, like producing weapons of mass destruction and so on. But we're very unconscious, and I think it's even true of scientists themselves, of the history of science and the way science arose from genuine curiosity and the great adventure. You know, naturalists with their butterfly nets and microscopes and collecting jars, and people like Faraday and others who somehow, when you look back at them, they seem to be fully integrated members of society, and yet in their back kitchen they had a little bit of electrical apparatus, and they were finding out about electromagnetism. That all those stories are very wonderful stories and very inspiring ones, and that it would be a good thing both for trainee scientists and for the general public to know much more about how very much part of the texture of life all that hinterland of the adventure really was. But I do agree with you that the other aspect of taking for granted what science has given us in the way of our teeth and bones and general good health and the rest would be you know, sort of given a boost by just the realization of just how horrible life could be, even as short a time ago as the 1930s and before there were antibiotics. And in fact, just recently in London, the Wellcome Institute there put on an exhibition of excavated skeletons. I mean, London is a very old city, more than 2,000 years old. You know, we walk every day on layers and layers of bones, and every time a building is excavated, foundations thereof, they find burials, they find bones, and by examining them, because the Wellcome Trust is a biomedical research institute, by examining them, they've been able to say something about the lives and diseases and deaths of these individuals, and it's horrific. You know, even something like an abscessed tooth, which could be life-threatening if left untreated, or the syphilis, or the scurvy, or the dietary deficits these people suffered. You can see them in their bones, and it's an extraordinary revelation, really, to think that the quality and character of our lives now is utterly different from that, and as a result of the huge progress made for us by science. Of course, it's also rather salutary to contrast our experience in the rich, comfortable, largely safe West and the life of people in Africa and other developing countries too, where many of those things are still endemic.
Thank you. Earlier on, early in your talk, you talked about how you separated out arts and science, and you had to determine. It seems to me that when I look at a faculty of arts nowadays, you know, anthropology used to be in arts, and it still is, I suppose, and archaeology and sociology and psychology, but all of them are, it seems to me, are kind of leaning over towards the scientific method and are now essentially becoming sciences. I mean, when I read Patricia Churchland, we're talking science there in philosophy and Dennett and so on. Do you have a, you know, is there really that much difference anymore? Are we now, the introspection that used to be part of the way that one determined philosophical structure or whatever, seems to be moving towards, you know, biology now, and are arts and sciences melding together in, do you think?
It's a very interesting question, that, isn't it? Because it looks as though the recent history of these different pursuits recapitulates the history of philosophy itself, at least in the modern period, because you could argue that that if you think of philosophy as inquiry, I mean, after all, our predecessors in classical antiquity didn't think of themselves as doing philosophy as we think of it now, or science as we think of it now, and so on, but just inquiry in general, really trying to make some sense of things. And
it means love of knowledge, doesn't it, philosophy?
It literally does, but what it really portends is inquiry, is trying to understand, find out, make sense, come up with decent ways of thinking about things, constructing conceptual frameworks that make us deal with the data better. And you might argue that in the 16th and 17th century, what happened was that philosophical interest into nature, into the natural world, found ways of asking its questions and found ways of answering them, which were particularly productive. These took the form, if you look at the way Galileo, for example, does things, of using quantitative methods rather than, you know, the sort of Aristotelian thing of saying that your heart beats because it's got a pulsative faculty and everything falls because they want to get to the center of the earth and so on. But finding a different way of describing the relationships between things, which is much, much more predictive, powerfully predictive, and more adequate to the phenomena. So it's as though philosophy, having found with respect to a certain set of questions a good way of asking them and a good way of answering them, was able to see that bit of the inquiry become independent, to grow up as a powerful new set of disciplines. The same thing might be said about the beginnings of psychology in the 18th century, with sociology and empirical linguistics in the 19th century, with artificial intelligence, cognitive science in the 20th century, although there philosophy of mind and computer science and neurology started to come together in very, very interesting ways. But it's right and proper that more and more of what we investigate, what we try to understand, should come into this very well-disciplined structure, which, broadly speaking, science is, because it's a disciplined set of methodologies and ways of making, in a very cross-testable way, empirically based, quantitative way, advances in our understanding of something. It may be that in just the same way that even fundamental physics ends up back in philosophy, because there are some philosophical questions it prompts, so it might be that there will always be an aspect of these pursuits which are or require the techniques and the methodologies of the humanities or of philosophy. But the more scientific they can be, the more likely we are to make progress with them.
Anthony Grayling, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.